Hey team, and welcome to another video in our Astrological Magical Elections video series. Today we are going to talk about the magical electional opportunities that are going to be available to us between our Virgo New Moon on August the 26th through until our Pisces Full Moon on September 9th. Before we jump into talking about... Hi Lee, Lee's here again, of course. Here's Lee. We're twins. Hi. Here's Lee. Blossom is also here, but you probably can't see her because my lighting does not allow her to be seen. So let's try to do this. Blossom, wave to Blossom. Blossom, Lee, get your butt out of the camera. This is a nightmare. I apologize. This is a nightmare. Here's Blossom. Hi, Blossom. And then Ty is also here somewhere, so I'm sure she'll make herself known. But those are all the cats in my vicinity. But anyway, before we dive into our elections, let's talk about my cats that are here. I know that's why you guys are here. But there is one thing that I wanted to talk about before we went into the electional opportunities for this 2-week period, and that is I'm beginning to see a lot of conversations or talk about the heliacal risings of fixed stars on various social media platforms. And while I am super excited that this is starting to get talked about more and passed along and starting to have some attention paid to it, because I think it's an important part of a kind of stellar magical practice. What I'm often seeing is an association or a statement being made between the heliacal rise of a star and a specific calendar date. Unfortunately, that's not really how it works, as the heliacal rise dates of fixed stars will vary considerably based on your location. So if you see a social media post that is talking about a fixed star heliacal rise occurring on some date, what you actually are seeing is the date that the fixed star is rising in the location, probably for the person posting that, but it could be very different in your own location. I think what often happens, or how this conversation gets started, at least this year, and maybe other years, but I haven't quite seen it, is a parallel kind of gets drawn between the heliacal rise date of a star and the sort of the Lionsgate portal thing, which makes the rounds on social media in August. It's supposed to be on August 8th, and people will claim that that is the heliacal rise date of Sirius, and that's why this is the date, and it's super important for some reason. But that's actually not the case. August the 8th might be the heliacal rise of Sirius in some locations, but for instance, in my location, it's like August 3rd. Even in Cairo, Egypt, which you think would be important since the heliacal rise of Sirius used to mark the beginning of the Egyptian New Year, is actually like August 2nd. So kind of off there. And the heliacal rise date of Sirius can be anywhere between early July to late August, depending on where you are in the world. So kind of wide variety. And then I'm seeing other heliacal rises of fixed stars being announced for specific calendar dates. And like, that's not going to be the case for everyone. And there are some fixed stars which will never experience a heliacal rise in certain parts of the world, which was something that my patrons learned when I prepared a gift of an alkaid talisman for them. Some of the patrons in the northern parts of the United States and in Canada, they didn't have a heliacal rise of alkaid to celebrate. Whoops, what are you going to do? So definitely something to be aware of. The only fixed stars where you're not going to see a lot of variability in their heliacal rise dates are going to be those that are very, very close to the ecliptic. Like Spica, I think only has like 1 or 2 days, maybe up to 3 days where the heliacal rise can occur depending on location. But since it's super close to the ecliptic, you're not going to have a lot of variety there. But normally heliacal rises are very sensitive to location. You can't take a social media post as giving like the definitive date of it, because all you're getting is the date of the heliacal rise, probably in that person's location, hopefully in that person's location. But if you're interested in exploring the heliacal rises of fixed stars that are, tailor-made for your location, I have a video on how you can do that. That walks you through the setup of a program that can calculate the heliacal rise of fixed stars exactly for your own location, and kind of what you need to do to tweak it to be able to do that. For those of you who have Mac and Linuxes or non-Windows operating systems, I don't think that program is still available for you, and I'm not sure of an alternative. So if you're somebody who finds yourself not able to utilize that program, but have a star or two that you are interested in finding the heliacal rise for, make sure to drop me a comment, either in that video or in this video, whatever, and I can swing by and see what I can do to help you get that information. So too long didn't read. It's cool that heliacal rise dates are getting talked about more on social media. Unfortunately, Social media posters are trying to associate the heliacal rise date with a specific calendar date. It doesn't work like that. It varies based on location. There's a program you can go and download to determine what that is for you. So go and do that if you're interested. So moving on from our conversation about heliacal fixed star rise dates to the main event while we're here, are electional opportunities from the Virgo New Moon until the Pisces Full Moon. And I wish I could tell you that our sort of election drought was over, but unfortunately it is not. We are still kind of in the thick of it for this 2-week period. Saturn and Jupiter are still retrograde, which puts a lot of pressure on the other planets to perform. We're still dealing with kind of some malefic configurations there, which kind of puts some pressure on different planets that we can't utilize. So it just is kind of difficult right now. And unfortunately, I only have 2 electional opportunities for each of the 3 locations to talk about right now. So let's go ahead and dive into it to do this for you. And we're going to go ahead and start with the Western Europe and North Africa. So our first electional opportunity for Western Europe and North Africa is actually going to take place on August 29th at just around 2:30. This chart here is set for 2:35 in the afternoon. And this is going to be an opportunity for a 15th Lunar Mansion talisman. The 15th Lunar Mansion is one that is associated with positive things. Of course, we're in the waxing moon phase, so we're going to take advantage of that as much as we can. And specifically, the 15th Lunar Mansion is focused on friendship and goodwill, helping to accumulate kind of like, and this tends to be more in like the career sector. So useful for kind of like having a good name about yourself in like an office or a professional setting. It can of course be used in non-professional settings, but that's kind of like the when you take the different kind of like symbols or powers of the 15th Lunar Mansion, it more accurately, I guess, describes like a more office type, a more professional type setting. You can apply that elsewhere, but that seems to be like the sweet spot of where these kind of symbols overlap. So we have the 15th Lunar Mansion, which is useful for like friendship and goodwill, also for the accumulation of financial resources. So for people who are kind of struggling financially right now, which, you know, who is in inflation, yada yada, the 15th Lunar Mansion can be helpful in finding new revenue streams and helping you manage your money more effectively and efficiently. And it's also useful for the manipulation of reputation and public opinion. So the 15th Lunar Mansion can also be used for like spreading rumors, which is normally what we would see during like a more waning, more malicious kind of application of this Lunar Mansion. A more positive one, of course, would be getting good reviews, having good word of mouth, having good thoughts, or, having good branding, or, having good things associated with your branding or yourself, or, things like that. It's a very emphasize the good or the bad, depending on how you want to utilize it. The 15th Lunar Mansion is good for that. But of course, if you're not in a situation where that's something that if you're not in a situation where that kind of sounds like what you need, that's totally fine. The financial applications of it can still be utilized, even if it's something that happens kind of outside of like a general office setting or something like that. Taking a look at our election, we have the moon placed here in the 10th house, conjoined Mercury. Normally we would want the moon a little bit closer to the midheaven, but in order to do that, that would mean I would need to go into a Sagittarius ascendant, which I'm not going to do because Jupiter is retrograde, and I do not like to have the ruler of the first house retrograde. I'll never put that in an election. So instead, we're looking to late Scorpio rising with Mars here as the ruler of the first house. The moon is applying to Mercury in Libra, which I think is a really awesome planet in general to represent the 15th Lunar Mansion. So if I can get Mercury, I know that I'm usually like, oh, the sun, I love sun, moons, aspects and talismans, and that's totally true. But there are some, of course, that have more specific, we'll say, planetary needs. The 15th, 16th, I think are really good Mercury talismans or Mercury-involved talismans. So having the moon apply to Mercury in Libra, I think is really appropriate for this. Not only is there the financial resources, Mercury's about commerce and trade, so especially people who are involved in like sales, but also when we're talking about like manipulation of reputation and public opinion, like hello, Mercury, the rumor mill, can be really good about making, the word of mouth travel really quickly. At the same time, you want to make sure that the moon and the ruler of the first house are safe and unafflicted. The moon is unafflicted by Mars or Saturn. She's far enough away from the sun to not have to worry about anything with that. A very bright moon, a very new moon coming out of here, very visible, but of course a very kind of infant moon, we'll say here. We're not seeing the Saturn be involved in here with either the ruler of the first house or with the moon. We might have, I'm going to go ahead and point this out because we might have some concern here with Saturn to square the ascendant. I don't think it's a big deal because I usually only consider 5-degree orbs for like angles and house cusps and things like that. If you tend to use a little bit of a wider one, feel free to move the ascendant around to make that easier for you. You could even do like an earlier Scorpio ascendant if you prefer. You'll have the moon and Mercury will probably move more into the 11th house, which is totally fine. But what I wanted a later one because a lot of people get uncomfortable with the nodes. And so, the earlier you go, of course, the more likely you're going to have the node with the ascendant. So, kind of finesse this chart around. You should be totally fine to do that, to get to where you're comfortable with the Saturn square not being involved, but also with the relationship with a node. And if that ends up being kind of like an early-ish Scorpio ascendant, as long as the moon doesn't go into the 12th house, you're golden. So just kind of keep that in mind. Work with this chart a little bit to get it to reflect a situation that you are personally more comfortable with. But I think this is fine. Just if you get a little antsy with connections with the ascendant, if 7 degrees is a little too close for you, totally fine. Move it around. Our second and our last selectional opportunity for Western Europe and North Africa is going to be on September 5th, this time at around 9:30 at night. This chart is set for 9:33. And this is going to be an opportunity for a 22nd Lunar Mansion talisman. The 22nd Lunar Mansion is one that is generally associated with like freedom and escape, especially when we're talking about a waxing moon talisman. The 22nd Lunar Mansion is about freedom from things. So if you are somebody who feels like you are kind of stuck in a situation that you need out of, regardless of what that is, if it's anything that you feel like you are stuck in or unable to overcome, the 22nd Lunar Mansion can provide you with tools to help you get out of that situation. So I definitely recommend the 22nd Lunar Mansion in a lot of instances, whether that's feeling stuck in a relationship and a dead-end job. It even has healing properties, freedom from illness, freedom from disease, freedom from pain, those kinds of scenarios or situations. So if any of that sounds like it might apply to you, I definitely recommend looking into this election and seeing if you can get it to work with your location. Here we have the moon conjoined the midheaven, which is good, and of course she is applying this nice trine with the sun. Obviously I was going to get a sun moon aspect in here if I could at all help it, and I did. I really like the sun, of course, when it comes to healing stuff especially, but even other 22nd Lunar Mansion significations I think are good with this, or with the sun connection as well, but probably leaning a little bit more heavily into the healing aspects here. At the same time, we're going to check the ruler of the first house, which is Mars here in Gemini. We're going to get a lot of work out of Mars signs because Saturn and Jupiter are off the menu for a while. And just because of how these situations tend to work out with the signs the moon is moving into. If I put the moon on the midheaven, then there has to be some sun on the ascendant. And a lot of times those are Saturn ruled signs or Jupiter ruled signs in this part of the zodiac. But right now it's Mars ruled signs. We're going to run with it as fast as we can. And of course, we're making sure that neither the ascendant or the ruler of the first house or the moon, this is the problem, then we have like 3 things to watch out for, are afflicted or are debilitated in some meaningful way or significant way. The moon's moving really fast at this time, which is good. Mars is not afflicted by Saturn. Mars isn't combust. Mars isn't retrograde yet. Mars isn't retrograde yet. And not until Halloween, thankfully. But even then, I say all that just because Mars is going to be, the meme is that Mars is going to be in Gemini for forever, which is like, I think it's like 8 or 9 months, so it is a long time. And also the ascendant is free. We've got a sextile from Saturn to the ascendant, but sextiles are fine with malefics. I don't really care about those. Oppositions, conjunctions, and squares are really the big hurdles that we're trying to avoid. So all in all, just a pretty good 22nd Lunar Mansion, kind of checks all the boxes. The trine to the sun is nice. I'd recommend this especially for the health properties involved. Do you like my really cool, really straight my trine line here? That's a really professional line. So Western Europe, North Africa, if this sounds like something that you need, grab it, because who knows when we'll have another one. So that's all for Western Europe and North Africa. Now we're going to move into Australia's 2 elections, and their first one is going to take place on September 1st at 9 in the morning. This chart is set for 9:03, and this is going to be an opportunity for a 17th Lunar Mansion talisman. The 17th Lunar Mansion is essentially like an anti-theft talisman. So it's really great for securing any sort of property, financial property, like finances, money, financial documents, private information. It's basically like an anti-burglary talisman. So useful if you feel like you need that, if you are, if you live in kind of like an unsafe area, 17th Lunar Mansion can be very helpful. But I tend to talk about the 17th Lunar Mansion mostly in regards to like identity theft or data theft or things like that. It seems like we can't go. Well, I mean, I guess for a while now it's been kind of quiet, but there was like a string of hacking incidents several years ago where it was like several high profile companies were hacked and like millions and millions and millions of people's data had been leaked. So even if you're secure, even if your data is secure on your end, which it's important to keep up with, you never know, what other companies that you've worked with and that you purchased from in the past may be vulnerable. So the 17th Lunar Mansion is really great when it comes to identity theft protection or like fraud protection and things like that. So that tends to be more where I recommend working with it. Not that you can't use it, of course, for like actual theft, like for physical theft. It just seems like that's a little bit less common than like digital theft, I guess we'll call it. I don't have a good word for that. Online thievery. So taking a look at our election, we've got the moon in the 17th lunar mansion conjoined the ascendant. The moon is applying to the node, but I think 13 degrees is pretty fine. I start to worry when we get around 10 degrees of the node, so I think we're good here. If this nodal connection is too close for you, I totally understand not wanting to mess with it. Absolutely. So definitely double check and make sure that the moon is far enough away from the node to be where you're comfortable with. At this time, the moon is applying a sextile with the sun. That's two sun connections. And I really like the sun connection with the 17th lunar mansion in particular. I would also like Mercury here, but I think the sun has an interesting twist on it in that the sun is really good about awareness, about visibility, things like that. So usually when we see the sun involved in like theft talismans or property protection talismans, it tends to be more like the person, like you are aware that something is happening before it happens. Like there's some indication that something's not right, and you're able to address the problem before it becomes like a bigger problem. Like you notice suspicious charges on your card before it gets out of hand, that kind of thing. So I really enjoy the sun connections here. It brings visibility, it brings awareness to a situation, and helps you have that kind of head start to be able to be like, this is wrong. Let's fix this before the problem gets even worse out of control. Going further from there, we've got Mars as the ruler of the first house over here in Gemini. Mars and the moon are all perfectly safe from Saturn. We're still very far out from that square with the ascendant or the moon. It's more like a trine here. One thing that I'll point out about this chart is that the ascendant is very early in Scorpio, which is what I want. I don't want a situation where the ascendant is in Libra. So if you're looking at the chart more through a Libra ascendant, I really don't recommend that. Because if you make Libra the ruler of the ascendant, then it points to Venus. I'm sorry, if you make Libra on the ascendant, then it points to Venus as a ruler of the ascendant. And Venus is under opposition with Saturn right now by 4 degrees, which is pretty close. And that's really too close for comfort when we're talking about the ruler of the first house being safe. So I would definitely go with the Mars rulership just to keep the ruler of the first house safe. So our second electional opportunity and final electional opportunity for Australia is going to take place on September 6th at 8:30 in the morning. And this is going to be the opportunity for a 22nd Lunar Mansion talisman. The 22nd Lunar Mansion is one that is normally associated with like freedom and movement. So it's especially helpful for people who feel stuck in some situation to help them find a path out of whatever it is that they are, whatever they feel stuck in. Whether that's feeling stuck in a job, helping you to find a new career path, or finding a promotion or some other something to help you feel more accomplished or better, more challenged or more just happy with what you're doing. The 22nd Lunar Mansion can help you with that, whether that's a job somewhere else or moving to a different kind of position within where you already are. The 22nd Lunar Mansion is also very useful for people who feel stuck in like relationships or in like physical dwellings, like in houses or locations, to help them find a path to leave that behind, to move somewhere else, or to leave whatever kind of relationship that you're in that you feel trapped in. Especially if that relationship is abusive, I definitely recommend doing whatever possible to help yourself get out of that. But I know that's not always something that is realistic in a lot of cases for various reasons. So 22nd Lunar Mansion definitely to help you find whatever way you can out of that. And then of course there's a healing property here with the 22nd Lunar Mansion is useful for healing, particularly within like individuals who are impaired, who are disabled in some way by their illness, which of course is that you're sick, you're ill, you're disabled. But that I mean more like people who suffer from like mobility issues or things like that, especially when it comes to like chronic pain. The 22nd lunar mansion is helpful for helping you, to get back some spoons, I believe is the metaphor often used. So taking a look at our lection here for this 22nd lunar mansion talisman, we have the moon barely hanging on to the 22nd lunar mansion. The 22nd lunar mansion runs to 12 degrees of Capricorn in 51 minutes. So we're hanging on by the skin of our teeth here. And at this time, she's applying that same trine to the sun as we enjoyed in the Western European version. Trine to the sun I really like, especially when it comes to like the healing properties of the talisman. Definitely recommend that. Right now the moon is unafflicted. Of course, she's not going to bust the sun. She's way too far. Not have to worry about Saturn's influence here or Mars's. And then we look to the ruler of the first house, which is Venus here. So we're far enough from the opposition with Saturn to not have to worry about it. Venus has moved into a different sign and is moving on. But one thing that I had to draw your attention to, of course, is the square to Mars that's happening. It's a little bit far out, but if you feel like this is too close, I'm with you. I agree. So here you have an option. You can either use the Venus, ruler of the first house in Virgo, which is fine. It's not great. It's fine. If the square to Mars is a little too close to you for you, I sympathize with you. So what you can do instead is you can do the election a little bit later. You can get early Scorpio rising like 5 minutes later. And then this kind of changes the tone to where you have Mars as the ruler of the first house. And Mars is unafflicted by anybody. Like there's no big deal here with Mars. So that would be your trade-off. You can either do the Libra ascendant, and then if the Mars square there is a little too much, if you feel like that's something you don't want to risk, or if you don't really like the symbolism of Venus and fall in Virgo, that's totally fine. Recommend using the Mars ascendant, the Scorpio rising, to get Mars in Gemini, which is, doesn't have any problems like that. It's not square Saturn. It's not in its detriment of fall or anything like that. So the Mars can be a useful alternative. All right, and so that's all that we have for our our Australian charts. I forgot where I was for a second. And now we're going to move into our North American charts before we kind of close out for this video. Like I said, unfortunately, there's just not a whole lot going on to cover. The North American charts are North America is going to have those same opportunities that Australia had. The first one takes place on August 31st at 11:10 in the morning is what this chart is set for. And this is going to be that opportunity for that 17th Lunar Mansion talisman. The 17th Lunar Mansion is a talisman that is primarily focused on like anti-theft, anti-burglary. It's a weird thing to say. Securing a property, things like that. So definitely very useful if you live in an area where you don't necessarily feel safe with things. Can be used to help keep your house safe from people who mean to take things from you. Can be useful to help secure finances. But I tend to recommend the 17th Lunar Mansion in more of a digital setting. To where the 17th Lunar Mansion can be helpful in securing, digital assets, can be helpful in securing passwords, helpful to prevent identity theft and credit card fraud and things like that. That tends to be a little bit more where people tend to find or experience these kinds of 17th Lunar Mansion-ish activities. So that's where I tend to recommend it being applied to, your online self. So definitely look into that if you were, thinking about or interested in kind of exploring different financial security options. Grab yourself a good fraud alert and a 17th Lunar Mansion talisman, and you are good to go. Taking a look at our election, we got the moon here in the middle of the 17th Lunar Mansion, and she is applying this sextile to the sun. I enjoy, of course, a good sun-moon aspect in almost any Lunar Mansion talisman. But I especially really like it. I feel like I say that a lot. I especially really like the sun in this instance because it does this. But I really like the sun, or I prefer the sun to other planets in a 17th Lunar Mansion talisman, because the sun tends to bring sight and awareness into things. And so usually what happens with 17th Lunar Mansions with sun influences like this is that the individual becomes aware of a suspicious activity before it gets out of hand. So it's like they notice a suspicious charge on their accounts. They're able to kind of escalate that to fraud prevention, and then it gets kind of taken care of before it's able to kind of snowball out of control and like massive amounts of money are missing or things like that. So I really like that ability to be like aware and involved, even if you're not somebody who is normally like hawkish about your about watching your financial things. It's just like you have a feeling and you go and check, and sure enough, So that doesn't seem right. You don't remember that charge. And it goes from there. So you don't even have to be like super vigilant a lot. It's just like it lets you know in some way that something's not right and helps you get where you need to go to be able to solve it, which I think is really cool. Then we got to make sure our ruler of the first house here, Mars and Gemini, is fine. And of course, there's no big worries here. You'll notice that the ascendant here is very early in Scorpio. Make sure you get the Scorpio ascendant rather than getting the Libra ascendant, because if you have Libra, then the ruler of the first house would be Venus, and Venus is opposite this Saturn, and I don't like that. I don't like that's an afflicted ruler of the first house. We don't want that. So make sure that it's a Scorpio ascendant to keep that Mars, who is unafflicted, and that tends to be more in line with a healthy and effective talisman. We want those. And then our final election, our second and final election for the North American continent, and our final election for our video is going to take place on November 5th at 11:04 a.m. is what this chart is set for. And this is going to be that opportunity for a 22nd Lunar Mansion talisman. The 22nd Lunar Mansion is one that heavily features Mercury imagery and is usually associated, especially in a waxing moon phase, with like escape. And freedom and things like that. So if you are an individual who feels stuck wherever you are in whatever situation that you're doing, 22nd Lunar Mansion can definitely help you become unstuck, help you find pathways out of whatever situation you're in, whether that's a relationship that you no longer want to be in but feel stuck in for whatever reason. 22nd Lunar Mansion, here's your door out. If you're stuck in a location that you don't want to be in, like you want to move somewhere else, but are confined there due to either like financial availability or whatever the situation is, 22nd Lunar Mansion can help you out. Feeling stuck in a job, you want out of it, 22nd Lunar Mansion can help you kind of find a good ramp off that is helpful, sustainable, and hopefully get you somewhere better that you want to be. And then, of course, there is a healing aspect involved with the 22nd Lunar Mansion, where it's about release, freedom from pain, freedom from illness. So very useful for people who struggle, especially with like chronic illnesses. Or chronic pain, chronic fatigue, things like that, to help give them some reprieve and a better quality of life, or more good days than bad days is is what we want, right? So taking a look at our election here, we've got the moon placed in the third house, or house of joy. I don't super like cadent houses, but the third house is the only cadent house I would really want to put the moon in. The ninth house, if I have to, super emergency, but the third house or bust. And here she's applying this trine to the sun in Virgo. Sun trines, very useful. I really like them in healing. I guess this is kind of while you can utilize let me think of a better way to phrase this. When we're talking about Lunar Mansion talismans, they tend to have, a lot of them have like different applications, of course, right? Like they have different powers, or that can be applied in particular ways. One thing that really boosts particular applications of a Lunar Mansion is the planet that the moon is applying to in that chart. So, for instance, the sun here is the planet that the moon's applying to. So this is something that I would recommend more for like a health talisman, because the sun heals. The sun is the font of vital force, helps heal people, helps make people strong. So there's a strong emphasis on this talisman as particularly a healing talisman. I could also see it being used as a talisman to help one in one's profession, because the sun is about authority, honors, things like that. It's about profession in many ways. So I could also see it being used for that. Whereas, like, if the moon had applied to Venus, then this could probably be like a better relationship talisman, getting out of a bad relationship talisman, kind of a thing like that. Not that you can't use this specific election for anything in that kind of list of what the 22nd Lunar Mansion can do, but because the moon applies to the sun, it's a little bit better for this particular application. So kind of when you're working to craft your own elections for Lunar Mansions, keep that in mind, that the planet that the moon applies to can help fine-tune kind of like the specificity, or kind of like buff the stats, we'll say, of a talisman in a particular way to be better at handling a particular situation than it would be, without that. So you want to kind of make sure that to get the most out of it, you want to make sure that you're using it in a way that aligns with that planet archetype in some way. You don't have to. That's not going to make a talisman completely ineffective if you don't line that up, exactly 100%. As long as you're applying to a planet that can reasonably do the thing for whatever reason, you're fine. But we're just like, the ideal situation, kind of crafting the ideal situation is what we would want. So sun here, health, probably also career, authorities, things like that. Moving on, looking at the ruler of the first house, we have the early Scorpio rising, looking to Mars here. All of my elections done except for one have been Mars, because that's all I can get to rule the ascendant while the moon is in a house that I needed to rule. So this has been my life for the past like month, and will probably be my life for the next month. When does Saturn go direct? Middle of October, end of October, something like that. Oh god, it's gonna be rough. So, and then we're gonna lose Venus because she's gonna go combust soon. Oh, what a nightmare. Just a lot happening. There's a lot going on. So very Mars dependent right now. We'll probably continue to be Mars dependent until Saturn goes direct, because then Mars will go retrograde. What a great life we live in. So, but Mars unafflicted, doing well. The moon unafflicted, doing well. The ascendant unafflicted, doing well. We don't have that Saturn to worry about. All in all, a pretty steady 22nd Lunar Mansion talisman. I would have liked to have the moon more angular in it, but the moon in the third house can be useful. So if you're in need of a 22nd Lunar Mansion, here is an opportunity. But all right, everybody, thank you guys so much for being here, for watching. Even though I didn't have a whole lot to share with you guys, make sure to check out that video that I've posted about the heliacal rise dates of fixed stars and how to determine them for your own location. If you're at all interested in working with fixed stars, through some way with that, you can also use heliacal rise dates as a kind of talismanic opportunity for fixed stars that otherwise might be kind of difficult to get for one reason or another. So definitely look into that if you need a different way to access some of the fixed stars. That'll do it for you. But again, thank you guys so much for being here and for watching. The kitty cats say thank you also. They've all kind of wandered off and sleeping. Blossom is still here, but she's hard to see. And a special thank you to all my patrons. Thank you for your support. If you're interested in joining the Patreon, please be sure to check that out and see all the different gifts and goodies that you get to be able to do that, including, of course, the community office hours and free talismanic gifts. Another giveaway will be happening at the end of October. But all right, thank you guys so much, and I'll see you guys again on the Pisces full moon.